Hello wankers, Flapjack Bickle here, with a quick chinwag about much loved HBO series The Sopranos. Now anyone who's watched this show will know that it follows the trials and tribulations of New Jersey mob boss Tony Soprano as he attempts to balance his work and home life. There's family man Tony, devoted father, attentive husband, not so much, and proud provider. And then there's Mafia Tony, ruthless businessman, serial womanizer, and of course remorseless killer. He's quite rightly the centre of the show, brought to life brilliantly by the late great James Gandolfini. But what about his long-suffering wife Carmela? Having watched the show in its entirety again recently, I was reminded of what a multi-layered character she is. Although she loves her family, she's actually quite lonely and unfulfilled. Her husband repeatedly cheats on her and her kids are spoiled and ungrateful. Daughter Meadow's a whiny little shit, and AJ's grown into a depressed monosyllabic asshole. Sorry if that sounds harsh, but I'm just being honest. Carmela's also riddled with guilt about how Tony makes his living, even though she enjoys the material benefits of it. And she clearly feels like a hypocrite given her Catholic upbringing and religious beliefs. This general unhappiness prompts her to seek out other male attention and leads to some uncomfortable situations throughout the show. So what I wanted to explore in this video is, of her four main crushes, who could Carmela realistically have a happy life with when she was finally able to crawl out from under Tony's shadow? Well, we might as well go in chronological order. So first up there's the priest, Father Phil Intintola. Father Phil doesn't seem to be your average man of the cloth, and his attention to certain female members of his flock is definitely hands-on. He turns up regularly at the Soprano household when Tony's away and eats his way through their fridge while watching sappy DVDs with Carmela. She's clearly attracted to his spirituality and his sensitivity, and their flirtations are for the most part harmless, but during the season 1 episode College, when Carmela's in a particularly vulnerable place emotionally, their friendship almost tips over into something else. Yeah, I thought it was only altar boys who assumed that position. Anyway, nothing actually happens, and by the end of the first season she realises that Father Phil is something of a user, kind of exploiting his position in the church to get what he can from lonely women like her. Okay, next on the list we have solid, working-class painter and decorator Vic Musto, who comes to do some work on the Soprano residence during season 2. If you remember, Vic's the brother-in-law of gambling addict chump Dave Scatino, who stepped in deep shit when he got into debt with Tony Soprano. There's an instant attraction between Vic and Carmela, and she has a visible spring in her step when he's around. They even have a passionate moment, kissing in the bathroom before she regains her composure and apologises. Later that day she phones him and suggests they have lunch at the house the next day and talk about what happened. Vic agrees, but after meeting his brother-in-law in a bar and discovering what Tony and his crew had done to him, he appears to get cold feet pretty quickly. The next day, Carmela's bemused to find Vic's workmate there in his place, who tells her Vic's gone to another job. What might have been, eh? Well, this brings us to her longest crush, Furio Giunta, a real tough bastard, who comes over from Italy to work as Tony's enforcer, bodyguard and sometime driver. After turning up at the house to pick up his boss, Furio bonds with Carmela, responding to her warmth and hospitality. At this point he's still struggling to settle in America, so she probably makes him feel less like a fish out of water. This extended flirtation seems to go on forever, and to be honest, the idea of Furio as a sensitive romantic would have been easier to swallow if we hadn't have witnessed him beating the shit out of a brothel owner and his wife in an earlier episode. Having said that, the actor Federico Castelluccio is surprisingly convincing playing both sides of this character, though I'm not sure how accurate his accent is. Well, Furio ultimately realises if he wants to be with Carmela, he'll have to take out the boss, and although at one point sorely tempted when a drunk Tony's standing too close to a plane propeller, he doesn't go through with it. So just when Carmela thought things might happen, he goes back to Italy. Okay, let's move on to Carmela's final failed romance, this time with Bob Wegler, who's AJ's high school principal, who she meets when she comes in to discuss her son's plummeting grades. They end up having lunch and then arranging a date. It's important to point out that by this time she and Tony have actually split up, so she's a free agent for most of season 5. I have to take a moment here to praise Edie Falco's work in the show, which is always top class, but in the episode Whitecaps, where their marriage finally unravels, she seemed to elevate TV show acting to a new level, showing spontaneity and realism I don't think I'd seen on the small screen up until that point. My only criticism of her is her voice can be overly sharp and twangy, but that's mainly due to the blue-collar Jersey accent she's doing, I suppose. Anyway, back to the love fest with Bob, which seems to be going swimmingly until it becomes apparent that Carmela can't help using the relationship to boost AJ's grades. Wegler accuses her of using sex to manipulate him. Carmela basically tells him to go fuck himself and storms out, and that's about it. Plenty of people are of the opinion that she only went out with Bob to give her son a leg up with his college admissions, but I really don't agree. I mean, okay, she does exploit the situation to her advantage, but I think she actually really liked Wegler, and she appears genuinely hurt and distressed after their bust-up. Alright, so placing these crushes in reverse order of suitability, how do they rank? Well, to be honest, when you break it down, it's kind of a no-brainer. Bottom of the list has to be Father Phil, not least because the bloke's a friggin' priest and wouldn't exactly be available unless he was defrocked. Added to which, his judgmental and conflicted personality would always cause problems, despite the fact they share common ground. In third place is bookworm Bob Wegler, and this is another relationship that couldn't go anywhere really long term. For starters, he and Carmela are intellectually incompatible, and although he claims to enjoy her honesty and unpretentious attitude, they're from totally different worlds. Okay, in the runner-up spot, sentimental meathead Furio. Now there's a definite spark between these two, but his violent streak and mob connections are exactly what Carmela doesn't need, and it's hard to imagine him settling into a 9-to-5 job. So that just leaves the very obvious choice, all-round good bloke Vic Musto, who pretty much ticks all the right boxes for Carmela. They share the same working class roots, he's good looking, masculine, attentive, has his own business. And let's not forget that after their kiss, Carmela apologises and says, "I haven't felt like this in a long time, maybe never," which is a pretty bold statement and illustrates just how attracted she is to him. It's probably as important to note the boxes that Vic doesn't tick. He's not a borderline psychopath, doesn't have the FBI going through his garbage, his office isn't located in a strip club, and he hasn't got his head buried between a pair of tits 24/7. These are all plus points for Carmela. So I like to imagine that she finds happiness after Tony's demise. And before you start bitching here, let's get real. It's pretty obvious he was about to get bumped in that final scene. I know it, you know it, and Misery Guts creator David Chase definitely knows it, since he accidentally let it slip during an interview a while back. So while Tony gets to enjoy fiery enemas in the pits of hell with Christopher, Richie Aprile, Bobby and Phil Leotardo, I like to think Carmela rekindles her flirtation with Vic and it leads to a fruitful romance and a happy ever after. Just spare a thought for AJ's therapist and the poor bastard who marries Meadow. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, but if not, feel free to drop to your knees and kiss my giant arse. You take care now.